Mr. Whitlam addressed a group of university students at Newcastle University today and told them, among other things, that he believed would be abolished. If you do this, it means that the federal government, which is now perhaps leading in tertiary education, would become the paramount authority, correct?
This is a matter we've discussed in the Labor Party. We first discussed it with all the leaders of the party in the state parliaments, as well as my colleagues and I, and we made the pronouncement at the end of 1967 that we thought the Commonwealth should finance and plan all tertiary education, not only universities, but also colleges of advanced education and teacher education.
And how far down the education scale would this go? Would you then dip into secondary and perhaps primary?
Well, what we said about there is that there should be a Commonwealth Schools Commission, just as there is at the moment an Australian Universities Commission, which should identify those areas where there are shortcomings and where the Commonwealth can help to remove them with grants, so that there'll be small enough classes, highly trained enough teachers, and sufficient buildings and equipment. And not only this, but also we've said that there ought to be an Australian Preschool Commission, because except in Canberra, Australian children are denied the opportunity of education before they get to primary school, before they're 5.
Federal participation in these things is usually, not only in education, is usually the thin end of the wedge towards eventual federal control, whether you like it or not. Now, you, for one, I gather, would like it.
Where great expenditure is required, then Commonwealth participation is not only desirable, it is inevitable. Before the war, for instance, there were only a third as many universities as there are now, and the number of students at those universities wouldn't have been a tenth of what there is now. And this great expansion of opportunities at universities has been made possible by the Commonwealth's interest during and after the war. It's not a question of taking away functions from the states. The states before the war spent very little on universities. New South Wales, for instance, there was one university before the war, and the state government spent $200,000 a year upon it. Well, now, of course, I suppose universities cost $200 million a year.
Well, taking this the next step, or the next logical step, and going beyond education, doesn't this mean to say that as expenditure goes up, the Commonwealth has to accept more and more of everything?
Yes, but this is as inevitable in Australia as it is in all developed countries.
Well, this means, though, does this not mean that the bickering between the states and Canberra over money is going to get worse and worse instead of better and better?
Only as long as our opponents are there rowing over it.
Why, have you an easy solution?
Well, we in the Labor Party say that it's not just a question of Commonwealth-state financial relations. There is the whole field of local government authorities and semi-governmental authorities, about which, of course, the Liberals never spare one bit of attention. They never mention it. But
isn't this just simply bypassing the states so that you wipe out the states virtually? There's little administrative use for them.
It doesn't involve this. It only involves it where expenditure is involved. I don't think we should ever overlook the vast field where the states have authority and the Commonwealth really hasn't, but matters which don't require an extra cent to be spent. The whole field of law reform, the whole field of censorship, the whole field of environment and pollution and conservation, the whole use of land. These are matters upon which the Commonwealth can scarcely spend can scarcely pass a law. They're matters where the states can pass laws. They're matters where comparatively little expenditure is involved.
Well, this is an economic society meeting, or it was today, so obviously money is being considered. And when it comes to money, the federal government's
Commonwealth's responsibility is obviously predominant. We can't in Australia have a good enough education, good enough health, good enough housing and environment unless the Commonwealth is involved in these very expensive activities. But all these other matters where expenditure is not the big thing, but where effective and modern laws are the things to regulate people's relations with each other, then the states have much greater powers than the Commonwealth. We should never belittle what the states can do in regard to environment and social laws.
Well, one sort of last question here. If the federal government holds the purse strings, as it obviously does, doesn't it mean that if they are ever to make effective use of them, they've got to find some way of bypassing the Constitution?
No, the Constitution is certainly wide enough to provide for better use of our resources, our financial resources, allocating them and planning them, than has been done up till now. I mean, what's happened to universities shows what can be done with a fair amount of planning and proper allocation of resources. Now, the same thing can be done about schools and preschools, about hospitals, about housing and housing land, and community facilities.
survey for the 1970 Ampol trial continues, it's becoming very apparent that this will be the toughest car trial ever to be held in Australia. To this stage, more than 15,000 miles have been covered by the Ampol survey team of Carl Kennedy and Reg Marnie. "15,000 grueling miles through almost inaccessible parts of the outback to plot a course that will really test vehicle reliability and driving skill." Whilst on this marathon survey, the Ampol team encountered all kinds of wildlife, including flocks of brolgas. Carl Kennedy assures us they'll dance if you whistle at them. At times, the trial will cross rugged terrain where roads are non-existent, and on these sections, navigators will really have their work cut out. Here, Kennedy and Marnie select a route across country riddled with holes up to 1.5 feet deep. Also included in the trial course are a number of private roads straddled by unusual obstacles called Cocky's Gates. Here, Reg Marnie shows how to handle one of them. The 1970 Ampol trial, an official event in Australia's bicentenary celebrations, has already caused widespread interest, not just in Australia, but worldwide. On June the 20th, some of the best rally drivers in the world will be competing for more than $34,000 worth of prize money.